Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Message Marketing Pod. Now, for regular listeners, we don't actually usually have guests on our podcast. However, today I've made a very, very special exception for quite an amazing gentleman here. His name is Shawn. And so I'll get him to introduce himself very, very shortly. But we are going to address this very, very topical issue and phenomenon of AI, artificial intelligence, that is happening right now in every space, not just the marketing space. But we're just going to have a free chat. It won't go for too long, and we're just going to basically discuss our thoughts and understandings of it at this current stage. It's evolving very, very rapidly, but let's see where we're up to. So we have different perspectives on this. So Shawn, can you please introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Hi. Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Shawn. The summary of the past 10 years of my career is that I specialize in SEO, and I'm very deeply passionate about it. Worked in a couple of agencies, was a partner in some, and now I run my own business similar to Chris. And I'm also, like everyone else, caught up in the AI craze. I'm very interested in what's happening in the space. And I'm especially interested in discussing the potential implications of the emerging large language models on the SEO space.
Wonderful. And look, I think that's what people are going to get out the most today is there's so much talk about it. So I thought, let's clear some of the stuff up and let's talk about it from a general perspective. So look, in general, I have actually made a lot of friends with ChatGPT now. At first, of course, naturally being a copywriting agency, we did see it as a threat back in November 2022 when it came out. But now it's just become almost like it's definitely a friend. And I'll go into how we're using it. But basically, my team were all afraid to use it, and I've been doing a lot of training courses with them to help them understand prompting, engineering, and basically using its output in creative ways, not just using its output. Because I'm against that. Like, just because clients that are paying us for our creativity, but when it comes to research and putting like all of those ideas together, that's been a really good use of AI. Also, another way we've used it is we write the blogs from scratch, for instance, using our own creativity, using AI research. Then we write it. Then what we do is we put that whole blog into ChatGPT and we say, did it meet this brief? Or did it cover the main topics? What do you think is missing? And often it will like say certain things, or it'll say, and that is a fascinating use of it. Another one that we found is really effective right now, and sorry, Shawn, I'll give you in a second, is what we found is we do a lot of core brand messaging guidelines and brand messaging documents for brands. And what we found is that if we put that 30-page strategy document into ChatGPT, it actually gets a really smart understanding of the brand. And then what we can use it for is actually help the client make prompts out of that. And that has been a fascinating use of its ability as well. So we're getting less scared of it. And to be honest, our clients haven't changed. It has been business as usual, especially our latest two clients are avid ChatGPT 4 users, and they still are coming to us to write their website and branding messaging. So there's definitely a space for it all. Now, I will shut up because I've spoken a lot. Shawn, what are your thoughts, initial ideas, and we'll delve?
Yeah, no, I loved what you just shared. And I'm also equally excited to hear your thoughts, Chris, and to hear how you and your team are utilizing ChatGPT and similar for your work, because it sounds already like you're on the forefront of people using it. Like, many people don't even know it exists yet. And
really, maybe I'm insulated, because that's what my operations manager Angela said. She's like, you're just obsessed with it. That's why you're constantly excited by it at the same time. But you've got to remember that I go to a lot of marketing conferences, and for those first few months, Shawn, I don't know how you felt. I was getting like almost hit over the head with it. Like I would go to a conference and I'd go, oh, we do messaging strategy and copywriting. And they go, isn't that just ChatGPT now? and it was so demoralizing at first. But then I went to conferences and they said that it's going to go through the like that like what they called it something like there's like a wave of excitement, and then it goes to the disillusionment phase, and then it becomes normalized. And that's what I think is happening.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting to hear your use cases. You definitely attend more conferences than I do.
Oh,
Yeah,
3 just this week.
yeah. Oh my God, that's awesome.
I'm very
Yeah,
exhausted
very
this week.
active. Yeah, no, that's super awesome. And I think the use cases you're talking about, I mean, in my view, are already really cutting edge. And what you're describing is really cool. I mean, the questions I've asked ChatGPT by comparison are very different. I spend time asking it about what it understands, whether it's conscious or not, and I'll
I
just sit
love
there for
that.
2 hours. Like,
I've seen some of your posts where you're like, do you think that like this is a reality, or what do you think? Like, how do you,
yeah,
and you know what? Like, isn't that's interesting? Like, I
yeah.
find that like, I know it's not a marketing thing, but it is interesting to delve into how it extends the way it responds to things.
Yeah, yeah. So with Bard recently, when Bard was released, it's been almost a week. It's not been very long since Bard was released, which is Google's answer, if we could
How
call
are
it
you
that.
finding it?
Not great so far.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Going
The quality of the responses that it's given are definitely not as good as ChatGPT. Um, it also, I could go into more detail, but the other day, just yesterday, I held a workshop with one of my clients where I was like, okay, we want to be on the cutting edge of how people are going to use search and use Bard to find businesses, because that I'm an SEO specialist, and my vision is that Bard and similar large language models will become part of the search ecosystem.
Actually,
And
good question.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry, and
and
I want to
yeah.
clarify for listeners.
Hmm.
So like Shawn, you're very high level, but like what basically what this is Shawn is saying that um, everyone is used to Googling it.
Mm.
And so everyone is used to going, I need a recipe. They Google it, they find things, and it takes them to a website. Whereas what Shawn is saying is, with the invention of ChatGPT and Bard and so forth, is will people still Google it, or will people just ask these AI
Yes.
platforms? And that's what, so that's what you're
Yes.
delving into. Sorry, go on, Shawn. I just wanted to
Yeah, I think
that
that
just in case.
question, that single question is monumental for an SEO specialist in 2023.
Yeah.
We should be asking that question. It's like, are people going to use ChatGPT instead of Google, and how? And those are like huge, huge questions. There are multiple arguments that you could make, sort of off the top of my head, I could make already. The first is like the pie expanding argument, which is like every time Google rolled out new functionality, people were concerned, what is this going to eat away at the old functionality?
Yep.
But what generally happens is that the pie just keeps getting bigger. So
Yep.
like it actually drives more people to use search. And so I can see an argument to be made that people, you might argue that people will take some queries from Google to ChatGPT, but I think a bigger argument is that ChatGPT will create its, or similar large language models, Bard, etc., will create its own audience. And the use cases that you're describing that you're already using it for are sort of examples of that. You weren't doing that with Google before. You weren't going to Google asking these questions, but now you're going to ChatGPT to ask these copywriting questions. And so one argument that I'd make is, again, I don't know all the answers right now, but hopefully I will one day. But there's definitely a strong, I think, argument to be made that ChatGPT and Bard and Bing's AI will actually generate their own distinct audiences, and people will go to them for very specific queries. Of course, some queries should go from Google to ChatGPT. Like, it makes sense that some will, but a lot might not.
And I agree. So I don't want to cut you off, Shawn, but like I think you're right there. And I know there's other arguments, and we'll get to them in a second, but like I think that that's more my thinking. And the reason why is because at least in the short term, I think that people often like the experience of going to a website. For instance, if you're looking up a hotel or you're looking up a city, you don't want just to see a bunch of text. You want to go and see photos and videos and multimedia and colors and things like that. You want an experience. And I think that that is going to keep people on Google and search engines in general.
Yeah.
But it's more than that, because I know that then AI will probably develop to have photos and all this sort of thing in terms of what the results it shows you. But then remember that at least with Google search results, you're given a choice of what you want to look at. Like, you look at multiple websites. Like if you go, I want to see Barcelona, or I want to choose my next school or university, lists come up and you go, this university, that university, I'll check them all. Whereas when you're using these language algorithms like Bard and ChatGPT, they're feeding you knowledge that it has compiled for you. Now, as accurate as that is,
or inaccurate as
or
it
is it
currently
inaccurate?
is.
Because
Yeah.
we've heard a lot about hallucinating, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I think that what I'm starting to see is that, like, if I looked up, and it sounds convenient, if you go, what's a quiche recipe, right? It will give you that, no problem. But the thing is that it might come up with a quiche recipe that doesn't work for you, or that you don't like, or but see, when you go to websites, you can actually be a little bit more discriminatory. Whereas with ChatGPT, you get an answer.
Yes.
And that, if you think about the implications of that, there's many things. Like I heard the other day, someone say, I use ChatGPT to plan my trip. And as innovative as that sounded, like I said, did you even verify what it gave you? And they went, oh no, I just went with it. I'm like, okay. Like, and so the thing is that I worry that hopefully humanity doesn't get to this point where we just go, yeah, trust it. Because what happens if you get there and it hasn't accounted for things, or it's looked up information and found things that are out of date?
Yeah.
That's, you know what I mean? Like all of that sort of stuff. So I didn't mean to take the conversation a different way, but I'm trying to explore that there are things that we need to think of here.
Yeah.
So Shawn, so we talked about the expanding pie. What are the other scenarios?
Yeah. So I'll just take you through a top level argument that I'm making at the moment, which is, some people, it's interesting that the moment we encounter technology like ChatGPT, obviously fear is one of our initial reactions.
Yes.
And what you're describing, yes, is certainly happening to a lot of SEO people too, which is is ChatGPT going to replace Google? There were some really exaggerated claims that, like, oh, Google won't exist in 2 years' time and stuff like that.
And
I just don't think
apocalypse as well. Have you heard that?
Job apocalypse. Yeah.
They said by 2028, 80% of jobs will be gone, or something along those lines.
Right.
And
that sounds just to me, that sounds just a bit premature to predict that.
To educate us, like if you know more, because for me, as much as I'm loving using it, I'm still in that camp a little bit. I'm not going to lie. And the reason why is because I look at it, and I've got all these theories as well, and that, like, and I just keep thinking a lot of different things. But yeah, like, let's explore your thoughts, and we'll go into mine.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the job market and SEO are very distinct things. Job market, we could get to in another conversation, but
this is going to take like 17 episodes.
Yeah. It
really will.
Episode 1 off, yeah. But when it comes to SEO, what I'll say is, when it first came along, definitely we were concerned about how people would use it. But I quickly came back to the purpose of SEO and search generally as a general principle. And my read on it is that people use search to learn things and solve problems. So they use search to go find information, and they use search to find organizations that can help them solve their problems. And if you look at it using that extremely basic lens, people are going to use search / ChatGPT / similar to do those things in the future.
Yeah.
So I've already done a bunch of research or playing around where I ask the questions. Try going and asking ChatGPT, I'm looking for a copywriter in Australia. Who do you recommend? Because I've done that already as a use case for how people use Google to search for copywriters, for instance. And what I've found very, very quickly is that the information it offered had a lot of problems.
Yeah, I've done this too.
Yeah.
Because coincidentally, like, I actually Googled someone on their Facebook. There was a marketing agency, and on their Facebook they posted a photo, and they asked ChatGPT, what is the best digital marketing agency? And it ranked them as #1, right? Now I went, oh, that's interesting. What's #1 copywriting agency? And there was 5, and sadly it wasn't me, right? But then I asked it again, and it came with 5 different ones, and did again. But then on top of that is, I actually said, I haven't heard of some of these. I looked them up; they didn't even exist.
Yes, yeah, you just hallucinated the answer.
And this is what I mean. And that's why I think everyone listening, be very wary. I'm not saying be fearful, but be wary, because it makes a lot of stuff up and it sounds convincing. Like this,
Yes.
it made up what the first 5 agencies were completely fabricated. Like I was like, oh, I haven't heard of those. I Googled them in 17 different ways. Like I was looking up Sydney agency, I was looking them up, and the only one that I found that matched was it wasn't even a copywriting agency at all. And so it had the same name, but then it had description. So when it came up with the answer, it said, these guys are based in Sydney. They're a team of copywriting professionals who strategize, blah, 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 right? And it sounded like stuff from my website. But then when I went to it, they were a wine company. So, so I was like, wow, like it completely made that up. And I think that that's what you're trying to say, Shawn, is we need to make sure that we're careful, because it is so convincing. And I have an example, Shawn, if you don't mind. Sorry, walking all over your statement for a second. Poor Shawn's like, I'm trying to be
not
patient.
at all. I'm loving this.
I went and wrote a press release for a client. They called me at 4 p.m. a few weeks ago on a Friday and said, we're a coffee company and we've just won 5 medals at a recent Adelaide festival. And they said, can you write our press release and send this out like in the next hour? So I did it manually. Like I got all the information, put it all together and gave it to him. He loved it and we sent it out, right? And then I was scheduled to do a training course with my team after that. So I actually went in and we were doing ChatGPT training course, and I actually gave it the brief and showed them. And I thought, let's see what it does. And it hallucinated so many parts of its answer. And I'll get to, so guys, for everyone who's listening and they're wondering what's hallucinating, it's when it pieces together a lot of different information and then it thinks that it locks onto some fact and explains the fact like it's truth when it might not actually be true. And so they term that AI hallucination. And so when I was showing them, it made up the CEO, and so it brought up a quote from her. From the CEO. She didn't even exist. There was no CEO that by Sally. She made up this quote that she had said. It also then, despite me putting in the awards and all the things that I had won, it made all the other awards up. It said that it won the grand final award, and it made up what the award was giving. It located the company under the wrong state. So it said, oh, this company based in Adelaide, and it came up with all these different facts. And I said to my team, this is why we cannot rely on its output, because it says it so convincingly, and it says it like with such it's such a
authority, right? It looks,
right. So I said, if I was to ever use this output, I probably wouldn't detect it, because I'd be like, oh, it followed the brief. And then I'd give that to the client, and the client would go, what? I didn't say that. Who's Sally? Like, who's that CEO Sally? So what I'm saying here is my team, I say to them, you're not allowed to use it for output, because it can convince you to think that this is the right research. And that's why I warn everyone, if you're using it for your output and you're going, write my homepage for this and write this, be careful, because you'll get output and go, that sounds right. You'll paste it in there and then you might get pinged for it. Like, especially in the medical sector, in some of those sectors that are heavily monitored, you've got to be careful with all of this. Sorry, Shawn, go on.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. That one of the key issues that I think is currently being faced by this is the quality of the output, as you're alluding to.
You can't blame it, because remember, it's scraping the internet and it's making judgments on what's out there. And so it's working on information that is misinformation as well. And so it's judging it. It's looking at it and going, it's scraping it and going, right, there's a bell curve here. There's some conflicting information. There's some similar information, and it's making a judgment, and it doesn't know how to make those judgments well.
Exactly. And I just wrote one word here to summarize one of the biggest issues that Bard and Bing AI are facing right now, which is endorsement. So in the past, when you do a search, let's say you do a search for like information about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, right? You do this search, and the fundamental theory of search and the user experience of search is Google comes back to you saying, hi, user, you are looking for X. These are some of the responses from the internet that might answer your query X. But by the way, it's sort of implied we have nothing to do with these results. They're just from other websites. And if someone says something wrong, that's not Google saying something wrong. That's third-party website saying
like
something wrong.
It's got its own opinion or something. Yeah, right.
But the problem with Bard and Bing's AI is there's this now additional layer being added in front of the web, which is the large language model AI. And what it says will come across as Google's answer to your query. So it's like now it's not the web isn't
taking responsibility.
That's correct. There's an endorsement. It's like, well, the web isn't answering this query. I'm not presenting you candidates that might answer your query. I'm presenting you the answer from Bard. And the problem there is there's a sort of tacit endorsement where it's like, well, this is at the very least a good answer, right? At the basic level. And what I think, one of the problems I think these models are going to have to overcome very quickly if they're going to keep taking off is that the quality of the answers is so bad right now, for Bard especially. I went and asked Bard some questions in the insolvency space because I have a client who works in insolvency. And I showed some of the answers to my client and we just laughed at it. I mean, it made up the most ridiculous stuff. And then when I asked it, where did you get this information from? It just sort of put its hands up. It's like, I'm just a large language model. I don't know where this information came from.
And that's what ChatGPT does too. Like I saw a lawyer, an Australian lawyer, analyze its terms and conditions, and that's exactly what it does as well. Is it says, "Hey, I'm just a language model."
I don't know where it came. It just came from my training data set. Sometimes ChatGPT will say that it came from my training data set, but I can't tell you what that is, and I have no idea.
And this is the thing, and we're getting into the darker areas of AI. Like I want this to be balanced. Like AI has a lot of potential because essentially what it's doing is it's taking the database of humanity and making it available, right? So there's a lot of things we can do in the green space, in the environmental space, in the cancer space, in the carbon space. There's a lot of things that it can do, and it's making things more accessible. Just like so a very small example, but just like Canva did in the design space. You still have designers, you still have all those people that do the high-end stuff, but then you've got this system that can automate some of the easier stuff. But I think that we need to be careful. And getting into the darker side is like, where do we go with this? Like, are we putting our knowledge feeds in the hands of essentially two companies, like you said with endorsements, are we literally now will ChatGPT and OpenAI's decisions feed the education of all of us? Do you mean like before we had different websites and we can be more subjective and really careful with what we choose? Like we get many websites and we can have a look at them all. Whereas if we are only getting this one answer from this one platform, are we effectively letting Google and OpenAI give us one answer and we're going, that's the truth? That's
the truth. Yeah, exactly. That's a huge issue.
There's no scrutiny. Like before even the internet, when there was encyclopedias, there was scrutiny going on. Yeah. Like when you read an encyclopedia, there were multiple people checking those answers and making sure so that when people did research from them, there was a validity to it. Whereas this is literally scraping websites, pulling all the garbage together with the truth. And what you're getting is this mix of different things. And then what people are doing is going, this is easy. I'm going to just use this. And I'm very worried. And then last point, sorry, before I get back to you is the lawyers that analyzed OpenAI's terms and conditions were very wary because like you just said, it said, you are responsible. If anyone sues you for copyright, it's your problem. There's no class actions can be taken. It has all these terms and conditions in there that everyone just accepts when they use it, saying we can't validate where our sources are because it's compiling all this information.
It's a black box.
It's saying if you ask us to validate it, we can't. And then it's saying if you get pinged for this legally, you're in trouble. And worse is, I think it said something like, you can't use our output. So it said like, our output is technically our
owned by them kind of thing.
Owned by us. So you can't use it. It says, if you ask it, it says you have to ask our lawyers to use it, right? And then it says you have to credit us for using it.
Yeah.
But then in addition, it says, if you get sued for this, it's not ours.
Yeah.
Not our
Yeah. It's really hands off, isn't it?
right.
Yeah. No, I think these are all of the fundamental issues. And I want to top that by saying, even if something like Bard synthesizes a response from 5 websites on a really technical topic, and even if all 5 of those websites wrote very well about it, the synthesized response might still have problems that are very, very nuanced. Problems of omission, for example. So it could write a response, but it could miss out on a huge point that's very important. And the answer might even be accurate, but it's just missing a massive, important piece of information. Or it can synthesize things together. The other day, again, I saw things that it said about insolvency law in Australia that were just absurd. But then it's like half of the response is really good, and then the other half is absurd. It can really happen that way.
And that's the thing, right? Is for inexperienced players, they might read that and go, "Oh, it's right, copy paste." Yeah. And like I knew of a case study recently where a client used it to write a basic website, and they said, "Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. I'm not a big, I don't care. I just got it to write a wine and cheese article," right? And when he sent it to me and he was kind of like a bit smug, like, "Hey, I did this myself." But then I read it, right? And Shawn, you said the nuances. First and foremost, there's nuances in language, especially region by region, that it doesn't get. Right. And I was at a marketing conference in Sydney, and that's what people were talking about, was like, there's nuances in language where it cannot replace. For instance, like certain things, when you add a little word here or there, it can actually change the whole sentence or mean something. And so sometimes I've seen ChatGPT get rude accidentally, right? Like, for instance, I saw recently a client had used it just to do some research, and it said, "Our cleaners are bonded," right? And what it meant was, our cleaners have a bond, so if they cause a problem, we can then pay for that. But what it sounded like was that they were restricted, bonded, tied up. And I didn't notice that. So that was one thing. But the other thing it was halfway through that article, it got onto this whole train of, if your guests don't like your wine and cheese, then boot them out the door. He didn't even notice it because it was like 3/4 down the article and it was doing great. And so back to what I was saying with your, Shawn, is the first half was great. It was saying, and then a rosé could do this with this cheese. And then it said, and it wasn't trying to be mean, but it was kind of like trying to be jokey. And it was but it didn't come off as a joke. It was like, kind of like, if they don't like your wine and cheese, then you should, promptly kick them out the door. And it wasn't like a joke, like a, well, if they don't like this cheese, ha ha. Like, it was kind of just like, it was saying logically, this wine, this cheese works. If someone disagrees, get rid of them.
No,
it's very AI thinking, right?
I totally, That's how the AI apocalypse starts. People don't accept wine and cheese.
And this is the other thing I was thinking about recently. And sorry, so I'm sorry, I've just got this so much stuff coming out of my head.
I love
the other thing I worry about is, in your opinion, like you said before, you said naturally what happens when there's a giant leap in technology is fear. Now, in previous generations, fear was kind of like, people were just a bit nervous. Do you think this time is different? And the reason why I say that is because never before have we had a piece of technology have the potential to actually go rogue. And I don't want to keep thinking, oh, Terminator, right? But this is, we're now giving the average person access to self-automation, right? And which they can use self-servingly or maliciously. And I'm wondering, is this just me being fearful, or do I have something to add? Because people, like before, if you were a cybersecurity criminal, you had a knife, right? Like, you try and hack and you can do these things. And I'm not in that world, but I'm like, I've listened to a lot of podcasts where it's like they try different things and they social engineer. Now they have access to all these technologies, and you're giving them essentially a rocket launcher, a bazooka, right? But then the problem is, the extra dimension is that rocket launcher bazooka can make itself into a tank without the human even knowing. And that tank can improve that tank and it can improve the tank.
That's the concern that
then,
some people are raising.
That's it. And then the human behind it can say, stop, tank. And the tank will say, I'm sorry, I'm carrying out my own worries now. Like, go away. Right.
The next thing we have iRobot, essentially.
And what I'm saying is, do you think that like, where are we headed here?
I'm going to give an answer that an AI can't give. I don't know.
Yeah.
And this is one of the advantages of humans, and I'll use my answer to make a point. One of the biggest problems with AIs and hallucination is they're not able to assess the credibility of their own responses. And I will try to use as long as I uniquely have this as a human, and say, I don't know. What I am very fascinated by is what's going on in the actual industry with, there's this recent open letter that we should slow down AI research by 6 months or something like that. Yeah. And then there's a lot of discussion about ethics and all of this. And my honest, my honest take is like, I'm a layman who's deeply fascinated by AI, but I haven't spent the last decade of my life like learning it to a degree that would give me an intuition where I could actually give that answer. And also, furthermore, even the people who have are themselves saying, we have no idea. I listened to a podcast the other day where someone was like the CEO of one of these AI companies. And he says, even for us, we have to spend like 2 to 3 hours a day reading the headlines of the latest publications in AI just to keep up. So even the people who are in the industry, who are founding these companies, who are doing the research, they themselves are feeling this is moving at breakneck speed. We can't even keep up with the developments that are happening. So I, humble Shawn, the SEO practitioner, I don't think I actually have the answer to that. But I will say there are a lot of smart people working on this, and there's a lot of human attention on this issue right now. And so when there's a lot of human attention on it, people take things seriously at the very least.
Well, look, that gives me some comfort. And it's not that I don't welcome the advancement. I do. Like, I don't want people to think, oh God, Chris is a fear monger. Not at all. Like, I do. I get excited. Like, I see the potential of working in my business. But I just worry. I worry that what does the future hold? And I'm hoping I'm going to listen back to this in 5 years and go, wow, we had nothing to worry about. And let's hope. There we go. Let's pray and hope and I'm not religious, but like let's will this into reality. But I think that right now we're adapting, and I think that's where businesses need to go, and with marketing and everything, right? Like, but I have theories as well, Shawn. Like, I was thinking, one of the biggest industries that it's actually disrupting is the legal industry. And I didn't see that coming, but it's definitely happening. And the lawyers are all talking about it. And the reason why is because you can literally type into ChatGPT, write me a will. Now, I'm not saying that's accurate, and I'm not recommending people do that, but you can say, type me in terms, like write me up terms and conditions with these parameters and all these sort of things. And it can do it. Now, again, I wouldn't recommend that because it hallucinates a lot. But I know that lawyers are paying attention to this. And I even know that some firms are now not hiring solicitors, they're hiring prompt engineers. That's actually happening, right? And even one of the premium partners of what firm I know said, we're starting to worry. Now, lawyers are the only ones with the real power to protect, like, and do things. And I worry, and I think, and I'm just hypothesizing here, but I worry that some, like, the lawyers will get their toes stepped on and they will take action. Like imagine if a copyright breach happens, they will all be over it. And I wonder, and this is just a theory, but I look at the future and I'm like, will the lawyers be the ones that step up and go
save the world from the AI apocalypse by suing these companies out of existence?
But that's what I'm saying. Like, marketers can't do much other than go, but lawyers actually have legal power. And
there are cases. Did you hear about the Getty? I think it's Getty Images suing Unstable Diffusion. Is it? Yeah, like there are definitely cases now happening where artists as well are suing image AIs
Oh,
for using their art as part of their training data set.
yes, and a singing artists. Eminem
Uh,
like had a one of the DJs did Eminem's voice. Went to
oh,
ChatGPT and
yeah.
said write a script, like write lyrics like Eminem, and then
Oh,
he went and got Eminem's voice,
yeah.
and then released it. There was another one that Spotify had to recently take down. Something, it was two artists, and it was a rapper or something like that, and someone had put it up, and it replicated their voices. And this is what I'm talking about, is now I have podcast galore out there. Like, can someone put my voice in and just
Yeah.
that?
Oh, I heard something recently where they don't need 100 episodes of your voice. I heard they just need a few seconds of your
Yes.
voice, and they could replicate it. So
And who's
one
policing
of
this? You see, this is what,
yeah,
that's where I get, and I don't mean to make this a fear
yeah,
podcast,
yeah.
but where is the who's policing this to say, like, what are we doing about this?
Well, I have some things to say by way of consolation on this
All right,
topic.
please, thank God. That was now balance me out. Go on.
Well, the first is like a lot of this has precedence. So like, yeah, sure, we can generate stuff that seems very inauthentic, but people have been lying and cheating and stealing in all sorts of forms for a very long time. And this is just one new form of that. And every time people lie or cheat or steal, in a way, we just develop mechanisms to counteract that. So, we have all this infrastructure of computing security and other things to combat these. And I think that the next, there's been talk of watermarks on AI generated stuff.
And that is, sorry,
Already,
you keep triggering me, because that's another thing. Like, sorry, I don't mean to stop you,
a
but like,
cat and mouse game with the watermarks.
well, I wonder, I don't know if this is actually real, because some people go, oh, how is that possible? But the watermarking, right? Another thing I've heard people say is, I'm going to use the output, but I'm worried that in 6 months' time, they might be able to go back and find that I've copied it and sue me, whatever. I don't know. Like, that's probably fear mongering. But that watermarking
Who
thing, if
knows?
it's possible, like, you might have an AI police agency
Yeah.
that goes, hey, your website is 98% copied from AI.
Well, actually, no. That's already
Oh,
happening.
it's real.
Yeah,
Oh,
no. Like Google. So again, this is why I come back to precedents. Before large language models could write your blog posts, people used all sorts of ways to automate the generation of content. The quality just wasn't as good as AI, and Google has had policies in place for a very long time saying they do not like automatically generated content. And they can detect GPT generated content because it has very specific patterns.
oh, does it?
Yeah. And in fact,
And
there's a
actually,
website, because there was a big concern with students plagiarizing, but like using GPT to write essays and stuff. There's a website, gtp0.me, that I've bookmarked, where you can just paste in content and it'll tell you this was generated by Bard, this was generated by
how does it
ChatGPT.
know?
Well, there are certain watermarks and patterns that are very, very unique to these platforms. The people who are in the industry have generated these statistical models that can predict.
Way above my brain.
Yeah.
Because I just think, like, in the end, how many times can you vary up the way I write versus an AI? But maybe.
Well, just think of even before the internet. You know how like authors, people who write fiction, say J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, she has a distinctive writing style. And if you have read all the Harry Potter books and then you read someone who writes with a very different style, we can tell that. Even human beings obviously have their own writing styles.
That's true. That's true.
And so the large language models have started. Now, of course, they might be able to mimic more complex writing styles. They might be able to cat and mouse. Again, they might be able to be more complicated, so it's harder to detect. But again, it'll be a cat and mouse game. There'll be these AIs trying to detect if it's AI generating, and then AIs trying to do that generate the content in a more sophisticated way, and so on and so forth.
God.
But it might actually be easier to detect AI written content than to write it. And this is like what often happens. I think I'm not an expert in computer security, but it might be easier to write the AI to detect the AI than to write the AI that can beat the detection. And that's the whole point of security and computer security. It's like
Yeah.
you can build something stronger. You can build a wall that's higher than the ladder that they can build.
Oh, and look, Google has the resource. If anyone has the resources, it's them, right?
Yeah. But if you check this website out, GPT-0, you can just paste in content and say get results, and it'll say 95% probability this was generated by ChatGPT. And so I've already started using it myself. I'll take an article that someone writes, I'll put it in, and it's like 100% human wrote this, or 50%, 50, or whatever. It gives a percentage result. So Google has had systems like this in place for ages and ages to detect automatically generated content and to ignore it. Basically, their policy is like discount or ignore it.
And that's why I keep saying to everyone, like, and you know what I listen to? Neil Patel, you know, the content guru in America, right? I heard him say only recently he presented at a conference and he raised two good points, which I loved, right? First of all, he said, I actually experimented with it. I had a human written only. I had AI with human editing and AI pure. And he said that he's done ABC testing. And he said that the human writing just ranks the best, right? So he said, followed by naturally what you would expect is the AI edited by human, and then AI were ranked very, very poorly, right?
Yes.
So he said that. But he said, let's say that forget that at all, right? Let's just say that forget that AI writing it or not. He said that you've got to remember that the rules have not changed. When you want people to read your content, which is the AI is not buying your product or service. AI doesn't have a wallet to buy your things. Humans do, right? So in the end, you want humans to be reading your stuff and looking at your stuff and watching your videos, and then you want them to be making a decision. So in the end, the rule hasn't changed, whether it's AI world or not, is that you still need to create content that is different, unique, interesting, engaging, inspiring, and that has not changed. So when I work with clients, I always say, I don't write Wikipedia like articles, right? I write the high-end key opinion leadership content because I want you to be interesting. I want you to be fascinating. I want you to stand out. I want you to be a leader for the right reasons. If you want those basic stuff, use AI, right? If you want to have the 5 tips to recording a video, I was like, go for it.
But the internet's already full of that stuff.
And that's what I mean. I said, like when I did an interview with a client just today, and he was a video agency. And I said, tell me what people are actually asking. Tell me what you want to be an expert on. And let's record the session. And then I will pull out the key insights with your quotes, with your things, right? And I was like, let's make it unique for all the right reasons. And he was like, that's what I want. So I feel like that as a copywriting agency, that is where we're heading, is that strategy, bespoke stuff, where AI would take the Wikipedia basic stuff, and that's where it's going to be, for at least for the next couple of years.
Yeah. I completely agree with you with that assessment. I'm still interested in how you're using AI. I think it's great.
Oh, no, I love it. Like, as I said, I'm using it for research. We're not using the output, and especially because I think that clients would be upset if we did. And so they should be. They're paying us to write it and research it. And I say hand on heart, we're not using it for output at all. And I forbid my team, like I said to them, like it's a big offense to be using it and passing it off as your work.
Your work,
And I said that's the rule from here. I said, however, there are instances where we can use it. For instance, coming up with layouts and ideas for how you, like chapters of a blog. I said, that's okay for inspiration. I also said, one of the biggest struggles we find is trying to find references and sources for things like if we write a HR article and we say, one of the biggest things you can do is inspire and engage your team with regular surveys. Often a client will say, can you research a paper or something that backs that up? And now you can ask ChatGPT. But even then I say, when you look at it and you ask it, check it, because I actually did a live example with them. And I said, find me a stat on this. It found it. And I said, interesting, where did you find it from? And it even said where it found it from, and it was not on that document. So this is what I mean. Is hallucination is a big thing.
Problem.
And it's like it said proudly, it was like 8 out of 10 businesses that don't engage their internal team suffer from 5-year losses of staff. And I was like, wow, that's a great stat.
Losses. Oh,
and I said, oh, that's a great stat. And I looked and I controlled F and I read the whole article, and there was not a mention not a mention at all. And it credited that exact source. It even sent me to the actual source. So like people, I'm worried that then what happens is that breeds because what happens is then people write that on their website and go, this is the stat. And then ChatGPT is reading that stat and getting reinforced. See? So it's building on like it's
I agree with all of this, but I actually think that this is the reason why it might not, especially Bard at the moment, might actually just not take off yet.
You're really hating. Are you really hitting on that?
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, Bard isn't my. Bard was very nice to me about my blog, though. I was like, "What do you think of my blog?" Oh, what a great blog! The Bard and Bing's AI are hallucinating and people are like within a few use cases, like you use it 2 or 3 times, you notice it has these issues. You're not going to keep using it. So like, and that's the thing with Bard and Bing AI. I used them a little bit to play with. I mean, maybe they might be good at some things. I'm not sure yet. But the moment that it loses credibility, you know what it's like with branding. The moment you go to a restaurant and you eat a meal and then that night you have gastro or you throw up, you're not going back to that restaurant. It doesn't matter if their other dishes were good, or if they fired their chef and they got a new one the next day. Your understanding of that brand is just set from that experience. And I think that one of the problems that these organizations might have now is that people are like, they're launching these AIs, they're saying this is great, and then people are actually using it and I'm like, this isn't that great at all. The output is really poor. And then what's going to happen potentially is they're going to miss a window. I mean, it's going to have to be really good when they launch it. This is why I think Google hasn't put a link to Bard on their homepage. If you go to Google and you do a search, you won't see Bard in the top. And I think the reason is it's just way too new to like make it mainstream. Now, it might improve. Like, obviously, the people who are working on the AI must be aware of these issues. The question is, how challenging are they on a technical level to solve? And it might be very, very challenging. So to summarize all of the above, there was a podcast that I saw where they said one of the concerns, the biggest concerns about hallucination is it's brought the cost of bullshit production to zero. And as you said, like, like
that's so true. I love that.
AI is like that friend of yours in school who's always exaggerating. And it's like, oh, I heard the aliens came down to the street the other day. You're like, what, really? And then like that's what AI is at the moment. It's just so incredible with what it's producing. And people who have serious use cases who are like, I have a problem that needs solving, then until they start seeing really solid responses back from the AI in real world situations, they're not going to use it.
Yeah. And that's what I'm seeing. As I said, like, I'm just seeing that the limitations, and you know what, in my summary, in the end, it comes down to time. And people, I'm just going from what I'm seeing, is that clients are still coming to me because they're like, write my website. Like, I want to spend 30 minutes briefing you in so that then you can tell me what and write all my site. Right. I'm too busy. Even if I sat down with AI, I'd still have to go, write me the first paragraph, write me the second paragraph, write me. And then they have to lay it out. And they just go, Chris, go away. Like, write it, see you in a week. And so that's what I'm still seeing. And I don't know. I'm just seeing.
I agree completely.
Yeah. It's an interesting place.
And look, in my case, it's the same thing. Like, no one's, in fact, it's in my case, it's a bit more exaggerated. Like, someone can't go to the AI and say, okay, here's my website, can you please SEO it so it performs well? In my case, like, SEO is such a multifaceted thing that involves so many different skills and work in different areas. The AI might write back like a bullet list of 5 things, oh, here are some of the basic things you can do for SEO, but that will be pretty much meaningless because you can do those things and then nothing happens. And so it'll be a waste of time. And then, as you said, and one other thing to just finalize your point on waste of time, you've been talking about prompt engineering. This is a term that I haven't heard. That I only started hearing the last 6 months.
Oh, I was about to say, you of all people.
No, I heard prompt engineering, but it's a word that like I didn't think existed 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
And I love the term, but I have a very interesting question for people who are interested in SEO to consider, which is, how long does it take to type a prompt to ChatGPT or Bard compared to type a Google query? So one of the interesting things about a lot of Google queries is you can often compact a lot of your intent in just a few words into Google, like car hire Sydney or whatever. But when you go to Bard, even if you consider the use cases of Bard, like looking for a car hire company for you, you would probably have to say like, hey, we're going on holiday on the 26th to 28th to Sydney. Could you please try find a couple of car hire companies, blah, blah, blah. And then even the queries that you're typing in are going to be long.
You're right. You have to.
They're going to be long and complicated.
Yeah.
The analogy I use is, you know, smart homes. I always tease my friends who have smart homes because I'll go into their house and they're like, hey, Google, switch on the light in the other room. And then 3 seconds later, Google gets it wrong. And then they ask a second time, hey, Google, switch on the light in the other room. And then I'll tease my friend, I'll be like, if I just walked up to the light switch and like hit it, like the light would have gone on, right?
Shawn, you sound like an old man. Like, I agree with you, but that's the most old person saying I've ever heard.
You know, if
like,
I just...
You young whippersnappers with your technology, if you just did this, this would happen. Yes.
Yeah. But I think I have a point, which is like, in all of those misunderstandings when it didn't hear you, and then Wi-Fi is disconnected, or whatever. Like the old-fashioned physical switch is just so much faster in comparison. And so I use the same analogy. Again, it's another question of mine right now is when it comes to prompt engineering, wouldn't it just be simpler, at least in May 2023, to just go to Google and type the query in directly? So I've been screwing around with large language models for the last 6 months, and I've been trying to use them as much as I can in different use cases. And I do find them useful for very specific technical questions.
They have their uses. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there for people listening. Like, don't think we're being negative about it.
Yeah, I'm not saying don't use it.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing is like raising these sort of qualifying questions, which is like, hey, 3-word query versus 20-word query. Are you going to sit and type the 20 words? And what if it gets it wrong? What if you're so used to or conditioned to use Google that you type in 3 words and you know how to scan the search results really well, which we all do, and then you can find the exact answer you want and then Control F on the page? That whole interaction took 10 seconds end to end, but versus asking the query and then it gets it wrong or it generates an answer that's missing something, and. And so all of these are, I think, things that need to be considered in the user experience and how it's going to interact with search.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know what, I know we'll finalize now, but like, I think that I've never even thought about that. Like what you just said, in the end, sometimes like Google has spent so long building their search engine algorithms that it's actually really easy to ask it over having to put in, and the prompts I'm seeing right now are like 3 pages long. Like I'm seeing people go blah 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 blah. Write it like this. Pretend you're this person. Write it in this tag. This and it like pretend you're that and pretend you're this and don't act like this. And honestly,
by the time you're done, you could have written it yourself.
And no, like I honestly I saw it, and then what I'm seeing is now a lot of prompt engineering services starting to go, here, let me give you a prompt, and it's like. It's getting complicated. But anyway, I want to wrap this up because I think we're going long enough, and I think that this was really good. Lots of insights in here. We will redo this again, I think, every few weeks because I think it advances so fast. I think there's a lot to talk about. So thank you, Shawn, very much for joining. So Shawn's from Hedgehog. Is that did you say Hedgehog? So
Hedgehog Search Marketing. Yeah.
There we go. And I love working with Shawn. He's fantastic. So definitely check him out. He's great at what he does. And I love how intelligent he is. Like, he doesn't come to these conversations unprepared. So thank you so much, Shawn. It was a pleasure. And thank you for everyone for listening. Please join us in the next episode. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris.